What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Happy Sunday, everybody. I hope everybody's having a great time in the start of the year. Last week was pretty crazy. For the channel, it was really good. It has been really good over the last week, but a lot of stuff happened. And that Sean Ryan podcast made a lot of waves, and there's a lot of new information in terms of that email that was sent. There were some inconsistencies to the email, but I also found out through people I've spoken to that are close to this, they confirmed that the email is from Mr. Levelsberger. And I don't know about you guys, but we started looking at some statements from people involved in this that usually release information. They um, were saying that the year was going to start out strong in terms of some level of disclosure. But I want to go further than that. I don't think it's just disclosure what is like accelerating. Do you see the same thing? Because people like use disclosure to conflate a lot of different things that are happening. And I've been trying to follow up on everything that I've identified so far, but please let me know in the comments if you think something is missing from the story that I'm about to cover, because there's this concept called the singularity or the event horizon. For me, it's more of a singularity because, well, yeah, it's basically similar concepts, right? That multiple things are moving towards a convergence point, and that moment is going to have everything happening at the same time in the timeline. And along the all the stories that are happening, I decided to talk about the ones that I've identified so far, but there are more. So the first one is, and this is something that I've tried to collaborate thoroughly to understand what's happening from a specific story, but ancient history and ancient civilizations. That is something that has been accelerating lately too. I'm talking about obviously all the Nazca mummies coverage that I've done, but there are many more different stories that converge in this one. The old vases that Mr. Matt Beal collects, that is one story that alludes to potential ancient technology that was capable of doing that. Everybody's trying to know, could this ancient technology have survived for so long? And if it has, who is using it? I spoke to Matt Pines about this, and he told me that UFOs could very well also be ancient technology, because if they're from here and they have been documented over centuries and millennia, that means that maybe they are ancient too. So that was a very interesting part of this. Yeah, I think that what's happening with the Nazca mummies, that video that I will play right now, this video of the fetus of Montserrat the mummy, I think that is one of the most compelling pieces of data that these beings were tridactyl, and there's something really strange going on with their DNA. That is undisputable for me now. There is still a lot of dispute and debate about the smaller bodies. I still have my second guesses on those, but the larger bodies are like, those were once beings that lived and had three fingers and three toes on each one. And that is a part of our ancient history that we need to know more about. If there's someone who knows about it, we are investigating and trying to look into it. Let's hope we can find something out. But that is one of the open fronts towards that singularity that I'm talking about. And it keeps going. Mr. Tim Alberino also did some very, very interesting work about the Paracas skulls. And that is also very interesting because those skulls were elongated. And that is very different too. And it is all around that same area of Nazca, Peru. Chile, all of that place. So something happened there at a certain point in time within this civilization. The other open front, and that I think for me, because it's the one that basically originated this channel, I think it's the consciousness and human potential open front and angle. And that is where all the work I've done about Jacobo comes into play. But there is also such a rich history with that. All the shamanistic and mystical traditions have dedicated centuries, even millennia, towards understanding human consciousness. And I think that is another aspect that is accelerating right now. The best example right now is the telepathy tapes. I will stay on my determination to know what actually happened with Dr. Greenberg, because he still rings to me as a very key player in this particular open front. That is another one. There are other scientists who have been, if not equally, a little more important than Greenberg. I'm obviously talking about people like, for example, Andrea Pujarich and Itzhak Bentov.
So the question I want to ask you is, where do you see us now in that evolutionary development?
Let me draw what is called a bell curve, which looks somehow like this. It's being used in describing random events. The bulk of the population today is this intelligent, more or less intelligent biped, all right? And with a vertical spine, and who pushes the buttons on TV and drives a car, etc., etc. Now, there is some backthrow. That is, there are some people here in this area, very few people who are still gorilla-like. That is, they are hairy. They beat their chest when they see their neighbors and a few other things. And then we have other people who are here in this corner, very few of them, who are very highly developed, because we say that evolution is now pushing mankind in this direction, away from the gorilla types towards the very highly evolved people. At this point, we're here. What's going to happen maybe 1 million years from now, 500,000 years from now? This curve is going to shift. It's going to shift like this. That is, the bulk of the population will be very, very highly evolved. We have gone away altogether from the gorilla types, no more gorillas. And what we have here now is the average man is now the retarded person in evolutionary terms. The bulk of the population is extremely, very, very highly evolved. And the cutting edge of evolution here, these are very, very highly evolved people. We can't even imagine what kind of person that will be. He may not have a physical body at all. What's the habitat, so to speak, of this group here? Well, you just go out and you find them. They're all over the place. The habitat of this group here, what do you think? Where do you think you find these people here? Hey?
I suspect you would find them in universities. You'd find the people who are very bright, people who are in the leading edge of professions. That kind of thing. I mean, it's an intellectual thing.
Well, I suggest that you find them in mental hospitals, in nut houses. And the reason for that is that these people, they live in a different reality, in a reality which is very changed, and few of them are adapted to live in this reality. So naturally, they can't function very well.
And even before that, Rudolf Steiner, there are many who have studied this aspect of the human experience, esotericism and ancient knowledge that also ties into this ancient history and ancient technology. They're linked. And I think that a lot of this psi phenomena that is being talked about so much lately, remote viewing, telepathy, all of this stuff, I think that is in itself some type of ancient knowledge that we forgot. That is what I think might be happening. And yeah, that is also accelerating right now. That is also moving towards that event horizon or that singularity. There's also, and this is one of the most eventful ones that I'm going to talk about, this nuts and bolts breakthrough science that seems to be happening. I'm going to play you something from Eric Weinstein right here.
I think that what happens next is that the string theory juggernaut that is blocking the exit is about to die. And there are huge things happening right now. Something huge is about to happen, gentlemen. And that is that we are about, I think, to go beyond the standard model and general relativity. And if you think about Richard Nixon as putting in the speed limit of 55 miles an hour around 1974, something like that, which lasted until the mid-90s, we've had the speed limit being the speed of light, or c, since 1905 until the present. And just imagine if the successor theory to Einstein's general theory of relativity doesn't have the same restrictions. Instead of fantasizing about wormholes or time dilation or generation ships, you may find that there are new degrees of freedom. And if you want to talk to me about what I'm really excited about, what I'm really optimistic about, is I'm hopeful that we're going to recapitulate within physics something that happened in technology. What about possible free energy? What about the idea of dark chemistry? Physics has been the provider of our economy. The World Wide Web comes from it, the semiconductor, all of molecular biology was founded by physicists. And physics at its highest level has been dead since 1973. The thing that governs it is called the Lagrangian. The Lagrangian of our world has not moved in 51 years. And 40 of those years have been taken up by string theory blocking the exit.
Okay, then I am also going to play you something from the Jesse Michaels podcast, where Eric Weinstein and Hal Puthoff had an exchange. And this is very interesting to me because this is when Hal Puthoff was still very much reluctant to be very open about what he's investigating. I still think that he potentially has access to some kind of legacy program from UAPs. I was suspicious about that. This is the part of the conversation they had right here.
You have to ask yourself, what Pandora's box would a new physical insight potentially open? The role of aerospace companies as holders of potentially basic scientific knowledge not shared with the academic world. Is it possible? It seems very wrong to me.
Maybe wrong, but it's true.
It is true. You believe it's true.
Yeah, I know it's true.
You know that there's physics knowledge held by aerospace companies that is not
There
known.
certainly is materials knowledge.
Materials, well, okay, material
which
science.
involves topological physics or whatever. I mean,
Okay. But fundamental physics as opposed to, condensed matter or...
right. Certainly aerospace corporations have knowledge in the UAP area that specifically are sequestered against FOIA.
Oh,
because of proprietary
I appreciate
labels, which the whole thing was set up to be that way, on purpose.
right. But the idea that there would be fundamental physics knowledge that would be housed in an aerospace company and not shared with the physics community, there is no evidence of that.
No evidence for it, not that I know of.
And I wouldn't...
That doesn't mean it's not the case, but...
That would be this crazy, egregious
It would change our entire concept of who we are if somebody kept fundamental physics secret in the years since we became capable of exploding fusion devices. Right. I would grab a pitchfork and a tiki torch, and I would march on the National Science Foundation.
But there has been a swift and narrative from Dr. Hal Puthoff. He was recently on a podcast called Ecosystemic Futures Podcast that I've already talked about in my 2 previous episodes. And if you haven't seen that one, that for me is one of the most important conversations in recent history about technology, because it is very open. It is very matter of fact, as we've said before. Hal Puthoff makes many admissions here that honestly blew my mind. And it also sent people who have been investigating this for longer than I have to confirm many of the things they've already suspected and have been trying to tell the people about, which is the actual study and scientific advancement of technologies that are derived from UAP, and also some type of breakthrough that may have been made way back in the past, decades ago, or recently. I'm still not sure if that is the case. This also goes into the whole 0 point energy aspect of it, which is a term that I first initially started hearing from Hal Puthoff himself.
So-called empty space isn't really empty at all. It's actually full of energy. So instead of being like kind of a quiet, empty lake, it's more like the froth at the base of a waterfall or something. And this energy is basically electromagnetic in nature, and the energy density is quite high. In fact, it's so high that when it was first discovered mathematically, it was thought to be some kind of artifact of the mathematics. But then as time went on, there were even Nobel Prize winning experiments that showed that this energy in so-called empty space was really there. We don't usually notice it because it's so homogeneously distributed. It'd sort of be like sitting in a bathtub with at exactly your body temperature. You might not notice the water. But under certain circumstances, it can be disturbed or perturbed, and then it has effects. As I mentioned, some effects on atomic emission, for example, is what eventually ended up in a Nobel Prize for Willis Lamb of Yale University. And it's called the Lamb shift. And this is a recognition that, in fact, this energy disturbs atoms. So atoms aren't sitting in a void; they're sitting in the sea of energy. So once quantum theorists realized that energy was there, the next question was, well, is there any way to tap it? And it was thought originally that probably not. It might be like trying to tap the heat energy around us. And you can quickly prove for thermodynamic reasons that it'll take more energy to tap it than you'd get out of it, so you don't come out ahead. But back in about 1984, a researcher at Hughes Laboratory by the name of Robert Forward showed that there was a particular effect called the Casimir effect, which demonstrated that in fact this energy could be tapped.
And it is a really complicated topic because there's a lot of people that feel we're like on a war for the uncoverment of new technology that has been hidden from humanity for decades. And if that is the case, it could well be. The reason that I haven't covered it as much is only because there are people within this community that have taken the topic and made it like a battleground. And you know me, I'm one of those people that thinks that staying on this calling out game and drama and fights and threats and doxing and all this shit is only doing worse for the topic, and it is preventing us from reaching that singularity. That is what I honestly believe. And anybody who engages in this type of reactive behavior, I do not want to engage with. It is that simple. Even if they're right, because many of them could be right. I agree. But I don't think people that are this combative and this reactive to this are doing anything good for the topic. Really. I get that they understand that this is like a life and death matter. I understand that, but there are better ways to go about this. I honestly believe that. I don't think that, because what do you want to do? Like, you really hate the people that are hiding this technology from you, and yeah, ending humanity de facto. But what do you want to do? Do you want to unalive those people? Do you want them to not exist anymore? Or don't you understand that we need to still be here after whatever happens is discovered or uncovered? We'll still be here, all of us. What do you want to do? Do you want to put them in jail? I don't know. It's a very sensitive topic, I know. But yes, this is happening. This has been talked about for a while. And where I'm getting at is that this podcast of the Ecosystemic Futures podcast that happened about 2 weeks ago, something like that. Dr. Hal Puthoff said this.
We found that they were layered alloys at the micron levels, and none of our technologists, even in the big aerospace corporations, could make these layers bond together. So just by their physical construction, we could tell it was way beyond anything that had been manufactured in our ordinary technology here on Earth.
Yeah, that's what I saw too. You were looking at the outside of a craft or materials that came from a crashed spacecraft or something?
Yes.
Yeah, so we were looking at very little things. They seem to deposit all over the world. We weren't estimating there's probably trillions of these things that are deposited, and they have all sorts of functions, which really kind of implies that maybe this group is actually manipulating our species. But you can still acquire those. You know where to look for them. You can find. We know how to find them.
Well, if you find a hatful, why don't you send them our way and we'll take a look at them?
Yeah, that's it. So the group I used to work with, I don't talk with anymore because they got upset at me for talking. So, but I have an idea where someone could get them.
I guess what you're saying, Richard, is they're ubiquitous, right? And so there's a variety of sources in terms of where to get these.
Yeah. We were assuming that they're everywhere, right? Even the ones that would work, we would never be able to find because they would cloak themselves or reconfigure themselves to be something. But not all of them are functional, right?
So that is Dr. Puthoff making many admissions that he hadn't made in the past. If he's doing that, it means one of two things for me. One is that either another nation already had a breakthrough and he has to start talking about it openly because his NDA is no longer being violated because that's a topic that is already out in the public, or something could happen in the future, in the very near future, and people need to start noticing. Those are the two options for me. And I don't know which is which to entertain. So clearly something is also accelerating in the nuts and bolts and science aspect of it. And that is another open front towards the event horizon. The other part that I'm about to talk about is the government secrecy reveal.
Or how frustrating is it? So it's actually, this is the thing. I do think that the government is trying to assess whether it's China or non-human. I think that's really the underlying question. Because if it's China, it's bad because they have technology that we don't understand, and they have advancements that we don't have, which is not good. If it's non-human, then well, we don't know why they're here. So both of those deserve additional resources to figure out the answer to.
And that's right. The way you're framing it is kind of simple, not simplistic, but simple. Do you think that's an easy case to make to the incoming Trump administration? Like, hey.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take. This is not an Elon Musk task. This is a task that can be assigned to a lot of people. But this is the thing. The patterns in sightings can easily be predicted, and I actually think that there's a correlation between military training, military activities in the U.S. and these sightings. So it would not be difficult to figure out if it's China, because if it is indeed China, they're using their technology to assess our military capacity, and we can create the systems through which they would then respond, and we'll be like, okay, it's China.
Yeah.
Or maybe they don't take the bait, and and it's not China, or it might not be China.
Have you entertained the idea of military contractors? Do you feel like that part of it?
I mean, that's definitely a variable, because we spend a lot of money to allow the private sector to develop technologies because we don't have the expertise. Yeah. So absolutely. But again, this is some next level. I mean, this isn't like 10 years ahead of where we are. This is like 50 or 100 years ahead of where we are. And, we've all seen, 6 years ago, I remember seeing what the world then saw in 60 Minutes, like a year or two later. Yeah. And, look, I got my private pilot's license. I understand physics. Yeah. I understand propulsion. I'm not Elon Musk again, but I have a pretty good grasp of that.
Yeah.
We have nothing that can do what I've seen.
Yeah.
So if you have no existing technology, either the Chinese are kicking our ass or it's something else.
Yeah.
Either way, we need to know, because if the answer is brought to us, it might be too late.
Yeah. And how worried are you just the idea of SAPs hidden from Congress? Like the Constitution gives you guys the power.
Which is the hardest part of them all, because if any of this is true, that means that the government and other governments have been hiding essential and existential information from humanity for at least 75 years, and from the scientific community at large, because I'm going to play you guys something that really shocked me from a few weeks ago. Mr. Mark Anderson, who is an entrepreneur, an investor, and a software engineer. He's like, in my estimation, one of the smartest people in the world. And he was talking to people in the government about AI and about how governments have been keeping some secret science from mainstream science and academia for decades. And this coming from him. If somebody knows about this, it's him. So here is Mr. Mark Anderson talking about this. Here it is.
We had meetings in DC in May where we talked to them about this, and the meetings were absolutely horrifying, and we came out basically deciding we had to endorse Trump.
What did you hear in those meetings?
AI is a technology basically that the government is going to completely control. This is not going to be a startup thing. They actually said flat out to us, don't do AI startups. Like don't fund AI startups. It's not something that we're going to allow to happen. They're not going to be allowed to exist. There's no point. They basically said AI is going to be a game of 2 or 3 big companies working closely with the government, and we're going to basically wrap them in a, I'm paraphrasing, but we're going to basically wrap them in a government cocoon. We're going to protect them from competition. We're going to control them, and we're going to dictate what they do. And then I said, I don't understand how you're going to lock this down so much, because like the math for, AI is like out there and it's being taught everywhere. And, they literally said, during the Cold War, we classified entire areas of physics and took them out of the research community, and like entire branches of physics basically went dark and didn't proceed. And that if we decide we need to, we're going to do the same thing to the math underneath AI.
Wow.
And I said, I've just learned 2 very important things, because I wasn't aware of the former, and I wasn't aware that you were, even conceiving of doing it to the latter.
So, yeah, and if you add this to the secrecy from the 40s with the UFO topic, from the 50s with the whole anti-gravity debate between all the people who basically invented string theory and people who were trying to see if gravity had means of being manipulated, this has been kept from the people for decades now. And that is the hardest part to uncover. I think that is what's keeping everything from being uncovered, if you ask me. But there's a lot of things that seem to be accelerating that are not dependent on this. So that is, in my estimation, what Colonel Carl Nell was referring to when he said catastrophic disclosure. Because if the secrecy is not uncovered in a relatively quiet way, or not as chaotic as one would imagine, a lot of the other things that are now happening, that are inevitable now, that are coming out, the effects of that could be catastrophic. Yes, that is. And for me, the one that really worries me the most is that psychological effect that is going to have in a lot of people. That is something serious for me, that I don't know if everybody's going to be ready for that, because not everybody likes a paradigm shift, especially if it's catastrophic. And yeah, what he said about AI is one of the other avenues towards the singularity. That is something that we cannot ignore. It's happening. It's real. We still don't know what the effects will be. I was speaking to my brother, who is an engineer, and he understands AI because he studied it in the university. And he believes it's not as science fiction-y, because he's never been, he's very materialistic in the way he sees science. but he also understands that it will still change humanity one way or the other, even if the science fiction aspects of it are not happening, which is still TBD, right? We still don't know. We don't know if an AI could develop a sentient personality. We'll see. And the last part that I think it's like also moving towards that singularity is some kind of time aspect to it. Something happened yesterday that shit happens like this all the time, that I just get an idea in my head and I just do it. Before I went to sleep with the wife, I asked her, I just out of nowhere, can we watch a movie? And I just looked for it and searched for it and clicked. And I asked her, can we watch Arrival? Because I don't know, I feel like watching it right now. She was like, yeah, let's watch it. And it was really weird how, I don't know if Denis Villeneuve has spoken to people who have written books or papers about all of these topics, but he sure seems very informed about them. And the way he took the story led to a very specific moment that I didn't remember was there. And it is something that I do talk about often with some of my guests, the concept of the universal language, which in that movie, it's those little circles. But in my estimation, the universal language is something very different. I think it has to do more with empathy and just like naturalist conversations, you know? And I find it really interesting that the time aspect of it, time not being linear and all that stuff, is very well portrayed in this movie. And I think that one of the storylines that could also be in play here, if any of this is true, is some kind of time manipulation aspect to it. We know about Dr. Michael Masters and his extraterrestrial model and everything that's happened to him. We know about Chris Bledsoe's whole story about how the lady appears to him and tells him prophetic stuff. We know that people, one of these psi phenomena has to do with precognition. So it's all like tied together, you know? We know that these bodies in the Nazca region make no sense, according to Dr. Piotti, in terms of where they stand in their evolutionary scale, because they seem to be from the future, according to Piotti. If that's true, we're dealing with some kind of time manipulation aspect that we still don't fully understand. But that's also part of it. It's part of the quote unquote singularity. And I don't know where this is going, but yes, more weird stuff is going to keep happening. The Tesla bombers story, maybe it's a false flag operation, maybe it's not. It's still very difficult to know what it was. There's a lot of inconsistencies in that story, but that's not the only story that is going to start emerging. There are multiple. So please just be mindful that we need to analyze everything in detail so we know how to discern between what is being fed to us as probably misinformation or disinformation and what may be true. We could entertain the idea that something may be true. But yeah, it's okay to ask for evidence and documentation and testimony from credible people. All of that together is what works and makes these stories more credible. So let's just keep our eyes out, our discernment sharpened, and an open mind. And more importantly, don't be afraid. We need to be brave and we need to understand that, yeah, the world will keep on changing. It will keep having these unbelievable moments, and we need to be ready for them. Whatever happens, maybe it's for a reason, you know? So let's see if this singularity does exist.
I look for the invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, possible human immortality, and at the same time, appalling acts of brutality, genocide, race baiting, homophobia, famine, starvation, because the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed. The collapse of the socialist world, the rise of the internet, these are changes so immense, nobody could imagine them ever happening. And now that they have happened, nobody even bothers to mention what a big deal it is.
I don't know if we're going to get it in our lifetimes, but if we do, it's better to be a little more informed than ready, right? Certainly, the people who are like at the very top seem to be very, very active. So let's keep an eye out for that. And that is it from a video. If you enjoyed the content, I'm going to ask you to please hit the like and subscribe buttons. We're nearing 13,000 already, so thank you. You can also comment whatever you want about this singularity. What is the singularity for you? What is the event horizon for you? Do you agree? Would you add anything to it? Another open front, as I call them? I want to know, so let me know in the comments. And please share in every platform you like. Thank you for the support. There are other links in the description in case you want to support the channel in any other way. I appreciate it. And that's it for me today. So I will see you guys in tomorrow's video. Bye.